I travel by night and I travel by day. I feel the breeze, I feel the call, and I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and they're mating call. The toll on the road is a small price to pay, small price to pay for the saving of the race. And so I say, aye. People, what you waiting for? Take one and leave one and take it to go. Make a decision and get on the road. Open your vision for the sun to shine on. Bamboo and acorn and a letter I wrote. Big ones and small ones and a pipe for a toe. The rhythms of time is the horse I ride on. I travel by night and I travel by day. Feel the breeze, I feel the call, and I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and they're mating call. The toll on the road is a small price to pay, small price to pay for the saving of the race. And so I say, aye. People, what you waiting for? Will there be raindrops and rainbows so clear? Perhaps some snow angels, maybe a bear. Anticipation in the heart casts a fog upon the road. How far till the train stop? I wish I was there. I glance at the paper just to be clear. All the coming and the going that will be once was foretold. I travel by night and I travel by day. Feel the breeze, I feel the call, and I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and they're mating call. The toll on the road is a small price to pay, a small price to pay for the saving of the race. And so I say, aye. People, what you waiting for? Sha-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-ne, sha-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-ne, sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-ne, sha-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-ne, sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. I travel by night and I travel by day. Feel the breeze, I feel the call, and I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and they're mating call. The toll on the road is a small price to pay, a small price to pay for the saving of the race. And so I say, aye. People, what you waiting for? By the green hill, my brother builds shelter. Make sure there's room for another. For surely what is mine unto you I will offer. For diligently guarding a citadel and cover. Wait for me by the green hill, my sister out there. You be safe from the blizzard and the blister. The marching will be hard, the mountains will shiver. So wait at the green hill down by the river. The harvest of the year and all the chaff is cast away. Marching then retreating to live to march on. Know that the resources are depleting. Yes, it's just the price we pay. Emotions, they are fleeting and lead many a man astray, tormented by the sword and the vagaries of war. The children of brethren cut down to the floor. The tyrants will freely board and the masses will applaud. All treaties and systems and kinships will fall. Wait for me by the green hill, my brother build shelter. Make sure there's room for another. Surely what is mine unto you I will offer. For diligently guarding a citadel and cover. Wait for me by the green hill, my sister out there. You be safe from the blizzard and the blister. The marching will be hard, the mountains will shiver. So wait at the green hill down by the river. Everlasting burn, the everlasting light, with passion and with verve. We shall tempt the edge of fate tonight. Cannons are blasting, hearts are filled with fire and fright. Weapons are massing, we're building them at higher heights. From depths of the sea to the soaring of the peaks, the children of brethren can't find their release. For vengeance or for peace, because the sorrow and the grief, the wind by the green hill will bring some relief. Wait for me by the green hill, my brother, build shelter. Make sure there's room for another. For surely what is mine to you I will offer. For diligently guarding a citadel and cover. Wait for me by the green hill, my sister out there. You be safe from the blizzard and the blister. The marching will be hard, the mountains will shiver. So wait at the green hill down by the river. Build shelter, make sure there's room for another. For surely what is mine to you I will offer. For diligently guarding a citadel and cover. Wait for me by the green hill, my sister out there. You be safe from the blizzard and the blister. The marching will be hard, the mountains will shiver. So wait at the green hill down by the river.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking, with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising, convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners.
Run, run, come, make we get it. Word 'em up, word 'em up, word 'em up, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be addressing something rather interesting today as a continuation of our series on the bed of procrustes. As you come in, please go ahead and click that like button, share the stream,
and let's get right into it. Yes, shout out to Bob in the chat. Shout out to Game Changer in the chat. It has indeed been a while, as you say. So we're going to get right into it. No need to linger. No need to linger. We're going to get right into it, ladies and gentlemen. And what we're getting into it today is something, a book of aphorisms, right? Aphorisms are like maxims, like short sayings containing some kind of nugget of wisdom, right? A stitch in time saves nine, for example. It's it's similar to a maxim or aphorism. Anyways, you get my point. Short sayings. And this book called The Bed of Procrustes is written by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Let me go ahead and see if I can put this up, ladies and gentlemen. A book of aphorisms written by Nassim Nicholas Taleb called The Bed of Procrustes. Now let's do a quick intro, right? Not a real intro because I think that, we've been talking about this enough on this channel. And if this is your first time riding on this wave, if you're hopping at this station on this train, you can always go back and check out our previous episodes, if you will, covering this particular book. But you see, The Bed of Procrustes comes from this particular Greek story. There is a man that lives on a road, a rather precarious road, one of the only houses around this particular road, and the ancient Greek travelers will travel, and this man was fond of being hospitable to the travelers. He would let them in, but his hospitality was a little strange. You see, he had this perfect bed. His perfect bed, the bed of Procrustes, and his bed was so perfect that you had to fit perfectly on this bed. If you were not tall enough, he would stretch you so that you fit perfectly on his perfect bed. And if you were too short, if you were too tall, he would chop your legs off so that you fit perfectly on his perfect bed. And Procrustes means the stretcher. So it's called the bed of Procrustes, the bed of the stretcher. He could have been the bed of the butcher as well, because he did both. Equal opportunity deformer. Now, this is a metaphor for the fact that we tend to force reality to match our models, our preconceived notions, ideas in areas where it doesn't belong, right? You want to do a line of best fit. You want to be able to make predictions. So you go out there and you tell your clients, I run this hedge fund and I use this technical analysis and I do blah, 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 blah. And this is how I predict stuff. How well does that turn out most of the time? Well, see, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be playing from this book of aphorisms by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, because these aphorisms touch upon this particular fundamental issue whereby we force reality to fit into our models. And then we blame reality for not matching our models, right? When the market crashes, when the forecast didn't happen exactly the way that so-called expert told you it was going to happen, when the disease spreads in a different way than was thought by the so-called experts and all these other kinds of things, then what? Shout out to the chat again. Please go ahead and click that like button as you come in, and please go ahead and share the stream as well. That'll be very much appreciated. Okay. So Bob says, long time, Dusties. Okay, Game Changer is out here doing his thing. Always appreciated. Shout out to D2 in the chat. I think partially this stream was D2's idea in a certain way. However, please like, and let's get right into it, okay? But before we start playing the video, before we start playing these aphorisms, I just want to say a little bit more about that thing about, well, fitting reality into a model. After all, someone like Game Changer would be like, well, at least something is better than nothing, right? My best approximation of the Game Changer course. You'll say, well, okay, sure, I get that I am using an insufficient model, an inaccurate model, and all that kind of stuff, but something is better than nothing. You need to be able to go out there and make predictions in life, right? In the chaotic space of the economy, chaotic space of within which most of human living occurs, right? Hard to predict and so on and so forth. It's not a ball rolling down the hill and trying to calculate the velocity. It's complex. There's chaos involved. But I need to be able to make certain predictions. So what's wrong with using a just good enough model, right? The false sense of security that you get from using a just good enough model only allows you to be able to sell to yourself and to others that your BS story is somehow credible. And this is how, for example, the hedge fund manager can get money out of you. Because if the hedge fund manager said, hey, you know what? I just look at the stars. Actually, I look at tarot cards. There's the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 and all these other kinds of things. There's a 60-40 split between bonds and stocks that it generally works. But, do I buy Boeing in my portfolio, or do I buy Airbus, or do I buy, do I go United Airlines, or do I buy Southwest? Well, if the stock manager came to you and said, you know what, I use the stars, I use astrology, I pick from the dice that I roll, you'll be like, no, I'm not going to follow you. But so he tells you some BS, which is equally unsure, but it fits into some kind of plausible model, and he shows you some charts. He commits chart crime on you, okay? He commits chart crime on you, and then you're not more convinced. So again, just a quick sweep, and then we'll get right into the aphorisms, ladies and gentlemen. I'm saying that basically the bed of procrustes, that story that I described, where the guy stretches you to fit his bed or chops off your leg in order that you might fit his bed, describes to us the human tendency to fit reality into our models, blame reality for not fitting into our models. The example that I like to use all the time is basically, rather than change the schools, you rather give the kids drugs so that they can fit better into your institutions. The schools, for example. Let's give them Ritalin so that they can fit into my little model of what I think education should be like, rather than changing my model to match reality. Now, this is something that we do conceptually. We do it also, as this example exemplifies, within the space of shared space reality and within the space of getting ends meet, raising children, and all these other kinds of things, right? And I said that if Game Changer came to me and he said, hey, but a model is better than nothing, I say, well, in this domain where a model is just as good as shooting dice, the only reason why you're giving me a model is so that you can sell me something, Game Changer. So you can sell me this sense of false surety, so you can fit this false surety into a narrative so that you can sell me your wares, whatever they may be, that you're an expert, for example, that you should listen to me, for example, claiming some kind of authority, some kind of power over me, for example, that you have a way of forecasting the markets, for example, that you have some kind of business strategy as a business consultant that's going to make me increase my profits by 25%, for example. Right? Indeed. So the idea that it is better to have some kind of a false model that gives you false surety as opposed to just having some risk management set of rules and then shooting dice, which is the reality in which things tend to work, and have certain basic heuristics, if we're sticking within the trading and your hedge fund manager domain, some basic rules such as make sure that you survive to be in the game tomorrow, and make sure you always know how much you're willing to lose. These are the things that leave you in the market long enough to take advantage of the chaos such that you can get some of that upside. Okay? As opposed to, let me just fit these things into some kind of a model. Let me do what I call technical analysis to be able to predict the market. If you could predict the market, you would take all the money in the market, right? That kind of a thing that we know that these are rough areas. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start playing this thing here. Bob has something to say. It says, to be devil's advocate, you need general structure to avoid total chaos. 100%. Yeah. And as you were typing that, I was getting into my whole risk management thing. So you need an idea of, here's how much I'm willing to lose. Here's the way in which I manage my bets such that I'm able to stay in the game for the long time. There's a saying that says, time in the market is better than timing the market. Time in the market wins over timing the market, because you're not going to time the market because the market is chaotic, and you can have all these best fit models all you want, but it's all bullshit. And it's good for selling people things and nice brochures where they commit chart crime on you. They showed you a pie chart, Bob. It must be real. But yeah, great point there, Bob. So these basic structures, such as the rule I mentioned about being able to stay here till tomorrow, and also the way in which you're going to structure your risk management and all these other kinds of things, yeah, for sure you need those. But the minute you start telling yourself that other BS rule based on a particular line of best fit that you know you came up with, that you pulled out of your rear end, it's only useful insofar as you're using it to sell things. Shout out to one man, the lazy youth. The lazy youth. Thank you very much for your pound sterling. 2 of them. Definitely a colorful pie chart. They show you that colorful pie chart. It's a glossy, or maybe these days, given the change in aesthetic, when things started going more natural and more organic, glossy didn't work too much. So all the packaging started changing to matte. I think we're going back to glossy now, by the way. For people who pay attention to such things, when everything started becoming organic and this and that and natural, we started using matte packaging and whatnot, cardboard stock. But yes, that shiny pie chart makes you believe that whatever BS they're telling you must be real. But let's get into the bed of procrustes one more time. Shout out to you. We got the dusty shout out to you, the dusty Gambian in the building. Let's go.
I suspect that IQ, SAT, and school grades are tests designed by nerds so they can get high scores in order to call each other intelligent. Smart and wise people who score low on IQ tests, or patently intellectually defective ones, like former U.S. President George W. Bush, who scored high on them, 130, are testing the test and not the reverse.
So, what he just mentioned about tests, I think the relationship obviously makes sense, and there's no need to dwell on this one in particular. And it would seem as though one man has dropped another super chat. But tests are meant to measure the things that we can measure, insofar as we're able to design the test and then execute the test and then measure that thing which we a priori felt was a good enough measure of some parameter we're trying to get, so that it helps us predict some other outcome we're trying to predict, such as SAT scores and all that kind of stuff. Shout out to the one man for his other super chat. Much appreciated. Much appreciated indeed. Let's see here. Can't post comment, can't do this, can't do that. You know what? Well, yeah, tests created to make ourselves feel better. That needs no further explanation. Let's go ahead and continue.
They read Gibbon's Decline and Fall on an e-reader, but refuse to drink Chateau Lanche Bage in a styrofoam cup. My best example of the domain dependence of our minds from my recent visit to Paris. At lunch in a French restaurant, my friends ate the salmon and threw away the skin. At dinner at a sushi bar, the very same friends ate the skin and threw away the salmon. Fragility. We have been progressively separating human courage from warfare, allowing wimps with computer skills to kill people without the slightest risk to their lives.
Now, obviously, this refers to skin in the game. Let's take a few steps back. There was just an aphorism talking about the fact that separating risk, separating cost bearing skin in the game from certain activities might not be such a great thing after all, right? Let's listen to that again.
Fragility. We have been progressively separating human courage from warfare, allowing wimps with computer skills to kill people without the slightest risk to their lives.
Without getting into the particulars about warfare and whatnot, there is a general principle here, which is the skin in the game principle. Wouldn't you not agree, one man, that basically you make different kinds of decisions and you move differently when you are going to bear the cost for your choices? Right, one man? If you could just push a button and anybody could die in the world, right? You know what? I want to get rid of this person. I push the button, the person dies. There's no risk to me whatsoever. You're going to have one kind of policy vis-a-vis your relationships with the world, right? As opposed to if you had to go there with the knife and the sword and kill the person and then defend yourselves against their family, their country, the laws, whatever else other people might think, and all those other kinds of things, you'll then have a different kind of a policy towards the world, right? That is obvious. But another way of just stating this fact is that actual contact with reality and getting consequences and real feedback outside from your head or whatever is key to the development of any complex system, such as the ecosystem, biology, or the economy, for example. And in this case, foreign relations vis-a-vis wars between nations. If you are able to do things that do not require you to go out there and be killed like most Roman emperors were killed, they died from violence because that was the way it was. Hence, when you say, hey, I'm a Roman general that's going to become the emperor and I'm going to wage war on XYZ, at least you know that you're going to bear the cost. And the whole quality of the activity becomes quite different. Is that not?
Epistemology and subtractive knowledge. Since Plato, Western thought and the theory of knowledge have focused on the notions of true, false. As commendable as it was, it is high time to shift the concern to robust, fragile, and social epistemology, to the more serious problem of sucker, non-sucker.
Aha. Let's check that out 1 second here.
The problem of knowledge is that there are many more books on birds written by ornithologists than books on birds written by birds, and books on ornithologists written by birds.
Now, we can see a continuing theme here of the skin in the game idea, right? Now, the previous thing that he mentioned regarding the state of knowledge, moving from true to false, or being focused on true to false rather than something which is more salient, which is robust versus fragile, right? With the idea that robustness is a result of trial and error, tinkering with your skin in the game, right? Right and wrong, you could say, exists within the realm of rationality, while robustness lies in the empirical world, right? And these worlds are part of ways in which we understand the world, or you can say two sides of a certain particular kind of coin. If you replace, or if you had this coin that says, hey, you have rationality, and then you have empiricism, because there's certain kinds of things that you cannot just a priori rationally come up with the idea or the answer for. You actually have to test it. You actually have to roll the dice and see, right? You actually have to go outside and see. You're not just going to perfectly using rational thinking alone figure out what the weather pattern is going to be exactly. No, right? That kind of a thing. But the idea that from tinkering and figuring out robustness, lots of actual work, survival, utility, value can be gained, as opposed to the idea of right versus wrong. And I would also say, by the way, that engineering comes before science. Solving the problem comes before articulation and further abstraction of what the solution was. Inventing the wheel came long before we figured out what pi was, figuring out how to represent cyclical or vibratory phenomena using the circle and the sine wave, for example. The wheel came first. We did not have to figure out the sine curve and the blah, the blah, the blah before we figured out the wheel. So a lot of times that engineering, tinkering, empiricism, which tells you what's robust, what works, and what can stand the test of time, which is the nature of also what we mentioned earlier, skin in the game, is a lot of times prior to the notion of education or knowledge. And shout out to the Dusty Gambian in the building. He might be the kind to say, "Oh no, but education is needed," and the mindset is always like, "Yeah." But it actually, you have to do stuff first, and then education. You have to be successful first before education. Education is a question of leisure. Education is something that you do when you have things figured out. And insofar as we're talking, let's say, for example, the peoples and the development of a nation or whatever it may be, first they have to win before they become men of leisure and philosophers. You're not going to win by studying your opponent's books. You can stay 10 steps behind him and whatnot and think, "Oh, I'm going to educate myself to winning." No, you got to win and then get to the point of leisure, get to the point of codifying or articulating actually how you won, and then get to the point of also writing the history. The history, is written by the victors, right? Everybody agrees with that.
The perfect sucker understands that pigs can stare at pearls, but doesn't realize he can be in an analog situation. It takes extraordinary wisdom and self-control to accept that many things have a logic we do not understand that is smarter than our own.
Two things there in those last two aphorisms. Obviously, the idea of, well, you can fool this particular organism or you can fool people at large or whatever, but me, I can't be fooled, right? I don't have these particular cognitive biases. I don't have confirmation bias. I'm not subject to the sunk cost fallacy and all these other kinds of things. I'm not subject to self-delusion, blah, blah, blah. But then the second aphorism about the fact that it takes a lot of self-control and such to be able to accept, for example, that this chaotic, decentralized system of trial and error, which, for example, organisms do in order to figure out if they're fit for the environment, is much smarter than you. As a matter of fact, it is responsible for you. Okay. And you cannot figure it out a priori. It's not a rational thing. It's not a right or wrong. It is a question of trial and error. It's a question of throw the organisms out there into the changing environment and have them solve the problem that the environment poses to them. And you can never know what the solution is going to be beforehand. You simply go in there. Some people die. Some people reproduce. Whoever reproduces is winning the game. Whatever traits they have are said to be fit. Now, this is a kind of intelligence that is way more intelligent than you or I.
Knowledge is subtractive, not additive. What we subtract, meaning reduction by what does not work, what not to do, not what we add, meaning what to do.
This is a pretty good one. I like this one. Knowledge is subtractive. It's about what we figure out not to do. And that's why it's pretty good when it comes to commandments and moral codes. Thou shalt not is way more powerful than thou shalt, right? It's like, hey, think about it. Think about it, Bob. You're going to come up with some rule by which people are going to decide what to do. They're going to decide what ends are worth pursuing, a hierarchy of values and the way to comport themselves in order to get to those values. In other words, values and virtues. Values and the things required for attaining those values, which are called virtues. And you're going to write a code on it. Bob, it's a lot easier to just tell people what not to do. It's probably like 7 or 8 things you got to say, right? Just don't do these things, right? And it's a much more robust, much more effective approach. But shout out to you. Shout out to you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Bob. Bob dropping that super chat. $5. Says, so you mean people complaining about work-life balance? That's an interesting term. You see, that's obviously a good question. That's obviously a good question. However, we will address it by leaving it on the screen and getting back to it a little bit more, right? One man went to Mo, says, knowledge is not subtractive. There's no such thing as subtractive knowledge. Okay. You see, one man, you're going to need to learn that there's such a thing as a concept, right? And the concept would refer to something a little bit more complex than the sentence might otherwise seem to be conveying, right? So basically, the idea here is we go out there and we try and we fail, right? And you're like, okay, well, these are the paths that don't work, okay? These are the things that don't work. It is another way of saying that you can never prove something, okay? You can only attempt to disprove it. And as a matter of fact, what is considered a logical hypothesis is one that can be disproven, right? So you have this search space where you're going out there, checking out the things that don't work. It's not that you go in there, boom, here's what works. No, that's not how it works. We go out there and we keep on pushing the boundary. That's how science, for example, develops. Pushing the boundary, checking out, does this not work? What doesn't work? What doesn't work? And boom, you knocked out Newtonian gravity and you replace it with relativity, right? Now you figured out, well, Newtonian gravity doesn't work, right? But the point is, it's not a question of those words. It's describing a particular process, which some people tend to not want to pay attention to, which suggests that engineering, tinkering, trial and error comes before what we call this kind of solid codified knowledge, which some people tend to think comes from the sky or something. It's like, no, it's not really how one gets to such a place, right? That's the idea. Anyways. Shout out to D2. She says she has never experienced the work-life balance thing. So a word on that. Shout out to Bob again. You see, work-life balance is a modern problem, right? Work-life balance is something that exists within a particular niche, right? In other words, the reason you're talking about work-life balance at all is because you're caught in a particular matrix, to use certain modern terms. There's a niche, there's a socio-cultural, ethical niche within which this problem exists. If you go to some farmer, for example, in the 1800s, he probably doesn't know what you're talking about if you said work-life balance. And he probably worked less than you, or maybe about the same amount of time, but but he was living his work and he was working his life, right? So there is something going on here whereby modern people are looking for something. Now, let me mention some certain other things that are symptomatic, or shall I say, exemplary of this particular symptom here. Work-life balance is for modern people because modern people actually go and run in some building, in some box, in some machine called a treadmill, right? To get their health, as opposed to, you can imagine some tribesman somewhere who didn't even have to worry about that. There's a compartmentalization issue here going on with the work-life balance, right? And we compartmentalize things so much that, obviously you have the valet take your bags up to your room, and then you go up to your room in the hotel, change your clothes, and then go pick up heavy stuff in a box called the gym at the hotel. You could have just picked up your bags yourself. But there's something about another kind of life flow, which exists in another kind of a niche, which you could perhaps create for yourself, or maybe is available in other societies or other epochs, if you will, in which this problem of work-life balance does not come up because there's certain kind of compartmentalization that would suggest that or bring that up is just simply not there. I hope at least that for now is enough of a word on the work-life balance plan.
The best way to spot a charlatan. Someone, like a consultant or a stockbroker, who tells you what to do instead of what not to do. They think that intelligence is about noticing things that are relevant, such as detecting patterns. In a complex world, intelligence consists in ignoring things that are irrelevant, such as avoiding false patterns. Happiness. We don't know what it means, how to measure it, or how to reach it, but we know extremely well how to avoid unhappiness.
This is perhaps a good one to a good intuition pump there to drive home that point about the negative being way much more powerful than the positive, right? Obviously, we just last talked about the whole tinkering, engineering, figuring out what doesn't work approach to scientific, the quote unquote enlargement of our scientific corpus. But also in this way, the thing that I told Bob about making laws, Bob is the legislator. He's going to start a new society and he needs to figure out how to codify the values and the ways of being and the actions and the etiquette of these people to the degree to which it can be codified. And I say, hey, Bob, it's much easier to tell people what not to do because there ain't that many of them. And we already quite know, okay, how to avoid that suffering, we know the direction of hell. It's heaven that is kind of tricky, right? What's the exact target? Okay, we tend not to know, but where not to go tends to be pretty stark, statistically speaking, in terms of people agreeing upon it. So that idea of thou shalt not being easier, and you don't need too many thou shalt nots in order for society to fairly thrive, as opposed to telling people what to do, which of course there's so many of them. And by the way, just a word, obviously the liberal kind of world in which the liberal democratic order in which we live in emphasizes the fact that, hey, you know what, a few thou shalt nots, and the rights are innate and self-evident given to you by God, by which you go ahead and pursue your happiness in all the multifarious ways in which you could pursue your happiness, which we're not going to specify to you, right? So all these things, quote unquote, the negative rights, which is also called in the American Constitution, that negative way of doing things, the thou shalt nots, the things that we avoid, the things that do not work, the things that we know we do not want, is a very good way of orienting ourselves morally.
The imagination of the genius vastly surpasses his intellect. The intellect of the academic vastly surpasses his imagination.
Now, this thing about the academic versus the genius that he keeps on bringing up is something also that's touched on by our friend Einstein and many others. Einstein mentioned, for example, that imagination is way more important than intelligence, right? Right? And he just said here also the imagination of a genius, the person that typically goes beyond that place where no one else is seen, pushes us further in our scientific knowledge or in some other kind of way, that person has more imagination than just what we call raw intelligence, which would be about processing. Imagination, in this sense, can be looked at from the point of view of a space of experimentation. Einstein, for example, was famous for his quote-unquote thought experiments, one of which revolutionized the whole of gravity business when he said, hey, game changer, hey, one man, hey, D2, think about this. There is something called the acceleration of gravity on Earth. It pulls you down at a certain acceleration, 32 feet per second square. But if I took you to an elevator and I accelerate you upwards at 32 feet per second square, you would feel on your feet as though you were standing on Earth. Hence, this idea of acceleration being tied to gravity in a certain way, which eventually led to the whole thing about the curvature of space-time and all that kind of stuff. But basically, I'm telling you that the kind of imagination that Einstein had, leading him to do these kinds of thought experiments, are what typically are responsible for the leaps forward, not just processing power like a calculator, right? Which typically we would associate with intelligence and whatnot.
The ideal trivium education, and the least harmful one to society and pupils, would be mathematics, logic, and Latin. A double dose of Latin authors to compensate for the severe loss of wisdom that comes from mathematics. Just enough mathematics and logic to control verbiage and rhetoric. The four most influential moderns, Darwin, Marx, Freud, and the productive Einstein, were scholars, but not academics. It has always been hard to do genuine and non-perishable work within institutions. The scandal of prediction. A prophet is not someone with special visions, just someone blind to most of what others see. For the ancients, forecasting historical events was an insult to the gods. For me, it is an insult to man. That is, for some, to science.
Forecasting indeed, ladies and gentlemen. And at this juncture, shout out to Zone, by the way. Shout out to One Man and Game Changer D2 in the chat. Bob, super chats, all that kind of good stuff. We are talking about the bed of procrustes. Okay, the bed of procrustes gives us that story of the stretcher that stretches you to fit his bed. And in the same way, we squeeze and stretch reality to fit our models, blame reality for not fitting those models. And then Game Changer came and said, hey, well, you know, it's better to have a good enough model than nothing. Shout out to Game Changer. I'm just picking on you. And then we ascertained that the only reason Game Changer wants to give us some kind of good enough model, right, is so that he can sell us something. Because in domains that are simply as good as having some basic risk management and robust tactics that keep you in the game so that you can take advantage of next week's or next year's volatility whenever it may happen, because it's a chaotic system after all. Now, the only reason that Game Changer is telling us that he has some kind of special graph is because if he told us that it's just rolling dice, bro, I just roll dice and I have certain heuristics, we wouldn't go into his hedge fund. He would not be able to draw nice pie charts that are colored on the glossy or matte finish based on your particular aesthetics. He'll not be able to do that. So we say, you know, good model, you know, the line of best fit, you know, I mean, it's a rough whatever. It's better than nothing. It's like, no, your grandma, your great grandma did not fool themselves with those stupid charts. They knew that, hey, might as well do astrology, might as well read tarot cards, might as well look at the fucking gizzards of a chicken in order to predict certain things, right? The false sense of certainty is an issue when we get into this whole world of the bed of procrustination of reality, ladies and gentlemen.
The ancients knew very well that the only way to understand events was to cause them. Anyone voicing a forecast or expressing an opinion without something at risk has some element of phoniness. Unless he risks going down with the ship, this would be like watching an adventure movie. They would take forecasting more seriously if it were pointed out to them that in Semitic languages, the words for forecast and prophecy are the same.
What he just said speaks to the point that I made earlier about somebody trying to tell us that he has some kind of a forecasting model that's going to be able to forecast the market. Here's my 60-40 portfolio whereby I have 60% bonds and 40% stocks, and it's been shown to perform blah, 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 blah. The only reason he's telling you that is because if he called himself a prophet, you would not buy his stuff, or it'd be for a different market. A different market with different lingo. He said he's a tarot card reader or a prophet, or all these other kinds of things. You're like, no, I'm not going to do it. But he says, oh, no. You know what? I have these models for forecasting. You see, your business performance, your market investment performance or whatnot, blah, 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 blah. And here are my nice charts and all these other kinds of things, which we know are lines of best fit and are operating within this domain of chaos, such as the market, such as the economy, such as biological life in general, and such also as our attainment of what we call knowledge, right? Because in there, we can only do things whereby we try to see what does not work, what doesn't work. Trial, error, tinkering. It's not some kind of a forecast, right? So he's not calling himself a prophet just so he can sell you something, but he might as well be a prophet. He might as well be a tarot card reader, because no one has the right models when it comes to these particular things. They're just forcing reality to fit their model. And then when it all collapses, here's another thing that, well, a good model is better than nothing. It gives them plausible deniability. Because when it fails you, you know what they'll say? Hey, we followed our models, but I guess, it just didn't work out this time. Ain't that right? Shout out to Alfonso Hall in the building.
For Seneca, the Stoic sage should withdraw from public efforts when unheeded, and the state is corrupt beyond repair. It is wiser to wait for self-destruction. Being a philosopher and managing to remain one. To become a philosopher, start by walking very slowly. Real mathematicians understand completeness. Real philosophers understand incompleteness.
So, before we get into the incompleteness question here, which brings my mind to things such as the Gödel's incompleteness theory and things of that nature, theorem, that is. The idea of walking slowly there, when he said, start by walking slowly, let me give a little kind of I'm not claiming any special insights here, but a little spin on what I'm thinking he's talking about there, because the thing is, when you are going to need to slow down and think and rethink, which, by the way, based on what he is saying, is to empty your head of all the false idols you worship, called false models of how reality is supposed to work and how you're supposed to project things and how you're going to use certain kinds of things. It could even be in the social space. You're going to predict how the Chinese people are going to behave, or you're going to predict how the blah, 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 the market, your chances of success. Am I going to sell the book? All these other things, all these models that you have, and all these courses that you're buying that are telling you that they have a line of best fit, blah, 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 blah. To empty your head out of those things, you're going to need to slow down to a point of almost discomfort, right? Which for perhaps a modern go-getter type, walking slowly might just induce. Just slow down, right? Slow down. Be humble. Slow down.
The rest don't formally understand anything. In 25 centuries, no human came along with the brilliance, depth, elegance, wit, and imagination to match Plato, to protect us from his legacy. Why do I have an obsessive Plato problem?
Okay, before he goes and explains his further elucidates that dig he just did on Plato, basically, I found that interesting. So he's saying Plato was so brilliant that the wool he pulled over our eyes has not been able to be removed by anyone else, because no one else has matched his brilliance, right? So brilliant that he pulled some crazy wool over our eyes. No one else since has been able to pull it out because no one is as brilliant. So what is the wool that Plato pulled over our eyes, if I may? Okay, he's going to say it, assuming that people know certain things. As Saul Bellow once said, if you're going to talk to people, they're going to need to at least know some things, right? So, the platonic, meaning the ideal, meaning that, let's say, the world of pure geometry or pure mathematics, that world of rationality that we talked about earlier, as opposed to the world of empiricism, which tells you about robustness, about trial and error, about tinkering, about engineering, and then you try to rationalize and create models of the natural phenomenon after you actually win, after you actually figure it out, after you actually experiment, that is. You see, The Platonic world is the world of the ideals, the world whereby there are these ideal solutions, the ideal bed, the ideal hand, the ideal mathematical world, where you can climb from here up there and discover truth, and there is right and wrong. This is the Platonic curse. Now, Plato himself might not be so low level as to believe in his bullshit. His bullshit was necessary in order to kind of, it's like string theory, for example. String theory is great because it does certain mathematical tricks. It unifies gravity and quantum mechanics. But in some universe that we don't live in, it unifies it mathematically. It shows that mathematically it is possible to solve this particular thing, unify this particular set of issues, but it is not real and not testable and whatnot. So in the same way, the Platonic world, which is great mathematics, great geometry, great reasoning, great rationality, but it is devoid of the world which we actually live in, which is the world of trial and error. And as I mentioned earlier, the world of trial and error is what is responsible for producing you, because you are a result of peoples that tried and didn't fail. And they reproduced. Shout out to Game Changer. That's his specialty. Isn't that right?
Most people need to surpass their predecessors. Plato managed to surpass all his successors. To be a philosopher is to know through long walks, by reasoning and reasoning only, a priori, what others can only potentially learn from their mistakes, crises, accidents, and bankruptcies, that is, a posteriori. Engineers can compute but not define. Mathematicians can define but not compute. Economists can neither define nor compute.
He doesn't like economists, by the way.
Something finite but with unknown upper bounds is epistemologically equivalent to something infinite. This is epistemic infinity. Conscious ignorance, if you can practice it, expands your world. It can make things infinite. For the classics, philosophical insight was the product of a life of leisure. For me, a life of leisure is the product of philosophical insight.
Oh, nice one there. And by the way, we're not going to make this stream too long. As we approach the 1 hour mark, we are going to start winding it down and such. Right? Ladies and gentlemen. That's been a good one. As I mentioned before, we've been doing this book, The Bed of Procrustes by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, a book of aphorisms, which is like simple maxims, little simple sayings, such as the ones you've been listening to. And they all somehow have to do with this notion of the fact that we force reality to fit our models, such as the bed of Procrustes, the bed of the stretcher, who used to stretch travelers to fit his perfect bed or chop their legs off if they did not fit his perfect bed by being too short or too tall, respectively. So we have been going through these particular aphorisms, and we've been learning a lot, haven't we? And we said that if somebody comes to us and say, hey, you know what, at least I have to have something, right? I need to have some way to make a decision. Well, here's the truth of the matter. You might as well roll the dice then. Tell me you're rolling the dice. Tell me that you're flipping the coin, because we seem to at least need to be able to associate, kind of outsource some kind of responsibility for the things that we do. So we need to read a tarot card. We need to talk to a prophet. We need to roll some dice. We need to do all kinds of weird stuff. But that is way better, way more truthful, and does not give us this false sense of surety that these false models will tend to give us, right? So let's play a little bit more of this and we shall continue.
It takes a lot of intellect and confidence to accept that what makes sense doesn't really make sense. A theological Procrustean bed. For the Orthodox, since Gregory Palamas, and for the Arabs, since Al-Ghazal, attempts to define God using the language of philosophical universals were a rationalist mistake. I am still waiting for a modern to take notice. Saying the mathematics of uncertainty is like saying the chastity of sex. What is mathematized is no longer uncertain, and vice versa.
Yes, indeed. I was indeed muted. But many aphorisms making the same point. The mathematics of uncertainty, for example. Well, let me try to, since we're talking about risk and risk management, then let me have this mathematics of uncertainty. Well, if it's mathematized, it's no longer uncertain. And it's just another way, again, of deceiving ourselves as opposed to going out there and living. Living. Letting go of all those things that you cannot control. Shout out to Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and the rest of them Stoics, right? Stoicism will tell you that this is the way to go also. Give up on those false models of yours, ladies and gentlemen.
Sadly, we learn the most from fools, economists, and other reverse role models, yet we pay them back with the worst ingratitude. In Plato's Protagoras, Socrates contrasts philosophy as the collaborative search for truth, with the sophist's use of rhetoric to gain the upper hand in argument for fame and money. 25 centuries later, this is exactly the salaried researcher and the modern tenure-loving academic.
Well, that last one speaks for itself, and it is indeed the last one, because that is how we are going to make it. We shall make it so. We shall make it the last one. The first shall be last, and the last shall be the first. In the name. I travel by night and I travel by day. I feel the breeze, I feel the call, and I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and their mating call. The toll on the road is a small price to pay for the saving of the race. And so I say, people, what you waiting for? Better procrustes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bob, for your $5 super chat. We have one man hitting us up here with the pound sterling, I believe 5 in total. And we have everybody else in the chat. Shout out to Alfonso. We have Game Changer in the building, D2 in the building. And yeah, and shout out for the idea to do the stream, and shout out to Zone also in the building. And until next time, make sure you don't deceive yourself too much. Yes, you got to eat, and yes, you got to sell some bull crap to some people regarding how much of an expert you are with your lines of best fit and your models and all these other kinds of things. But, don't believe the hype. Don't get high, ladies and gentlemen, on your own supply.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising. rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised. The battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Okay. We need to settle this. Yes, One Man Went to Mow does indeed have a jingle that has been created by me. From the streets to Savannah, everybody make a welcome to the one. I don't have the lyrics in front of me, okay? But one man, if you're still here, okay, this is how the song goes, okay? I don't have the lyrics in front of me, but I have the chorus, I have the verse. It's there. I just have to put it down on MP3, on wax, as we used to say back in the day, and I'll send it over to you. You know, every question needs an answer. We pave the way and we meet the standard. Ha! For trouble and wahala, everybody make we gather for the one man show. Yes, from the streets to Savannah. You get the idea? Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The system is coming. The system is coming for all. They're praying and chanting and drumming. With gladness they welcome the fall. The preachers and pilgrims will pillage. The pilots will drop down their bombs. Corruption will swallow the village. With blood we shall right all our wrongs. The toil of the farmers, the work of informers, paradigms and fables hoisted upon us. Searchlight is searching, police they are lurking, legislators from the dark side emerging. Get a bird word for the masses.